All right, Algebra 1. Guys, we are starting chapter 11 today. This is a big chapter, all right? Let's just jump right into it here. This is a big chapter. We've been working on polynomials in chapter 9, in chapter 10, and we are still working on polynomials here in chapter 11. And we are, yes, introducing some new concepts here, but we are also bringing back all the big topics that we have used in past chapters dealing with polynomials. So factoring is coming back in a big way. You may also be using the quadratic formula, and we will be simplifying polynomials as well. We will be multiplying with polynomials, dividing with polynomials, and all kinds of fun stuff. Yes, with polynomials. All right. So that might mean you need a refresher, meaning you need to go back and look at some of the prior note videos that are all on my YouTube page and take the time to do that if you need it. Okay. In class, yes, we are still progressing. And yes, of course, I do plenty of example problems on the board and give you guys a lot of time to ask questions. But if you don't take advantage of that time and ask questions, pay attention to the example problems, give it your full and honest focus, or even go above and watch those past note videos, then you may hit a wall here. And I don't want to see that happen. So I'm telling you this now as we are jumping into a fresh new chapter, that for some of you, that's what it takes. And I know you can do it. You have to stay focused, motivated, keep working hard every single day. All right, let's jump into it. So here we go. Section 1, inverse variation. All right, we have talked about direct variation before. That would be this equation right here. But now we are introducing inverse variation. That would be right there. Okay. The variable k still is the constant of variation. So if you have any recollection of direct variation, variable k stood for the constant of variation. It still does. That hasn't changed. Okay. And remember, at any point in time, pause the video. Copy everything down that you see highlighted. All right. Let's get into the next topic here. Is they could give you equations or formulas and say, hey, is this direct variation? Is this inverse variation? And you have to label it. All right. So what I've written up about that is you may see a format that doesn't fit direct or inverse. It may not fit it the way it's presented. So what do you have to do? Well, the first thing, if it's not solved for y right here, solve the equation for y. That is going to be the first thing. Solve the equation for y. Then go back, check that final format and see if it fits the parameters for direct or inverse. But there is still that third possibility that neither of those, so neither direct or inverse, will actually be met. And that is fine. If that is the case, then the answer just is neither or none. But be careful, all right? Look closely and make sure it is in y equals with y by itself, everything on the opposite side of the equal sign, and then look at that format. Okay, so here's what we're talking about in terms of that. Tell whether the equation represents direct, inverse, or neither. So they give you 1, 2, 3 examples. Notice right here, x and y are together. We need to convert that. So for A, here's all you have to do. You need to divide both sides by x. And that's what they've done right here so that y is isolated. It's by itself. Then when you do that, this is what you're left with. Y equals 4 over x. And that is in the inverse variation format right there. Inverse variation, meaning that k is a value. K is a number. But y and x, in this case, they're just those variables in the equation. All right, let's take a look at part B. Notice again, y is not alone. It's not by itself. So let's look down here where we see this one being worked on. And how do we get rid of that 2? Well, you have to multiply both sides by 2. That's how we get 2x over here. Y is now by itself. And this y equals 2x represents direct variation. Y equals kx is the direct variation format right there. So this is direct. So that one works out. Now, example C already says y equals. So we don't have to do anything. But the red flag, or a bell going off in your head type of thing, is this +3 right here. That sticks out like a sore thumb because that in no way, shape, or form is in either format. Yes, you do have a 2x, so you can say, oh, well, y equals 2x. That's direct variation format. Yes, but direct variation stops right there. This +3 changes everything. Therefore, that +3 is not representing either format. So it does not represent either. So it's a neither for that one. All right, let's take a look over here with graphing. If you are graphing a direct variation, it's going to make a straight line. Okay, that's really nice. That's easy. Straight line, remember, that is linear. That's what a straight line means. It's a linear equation. If you have a k value that's positive, your graph will go in a vertical positive slope. Okay, so you read a graph from left to right, and from left to right, it is going up. If the k value is a negative, then you will have a negative downward slope for the line. And again, read the graph from left side over to the right side, and it's going high to low. So that right there means direct variation with a negative. All right, but here's how inverse variation changes. This looks drastically different. You have 2 parts for starters, which is kind of different. You haven't had this yet. You've dealt with parabolas. The shape is similar to that parabola shape. However, you will have 2 of these. All right, and that is important to note. If your k value is a positive, I want to make sure that you understand. I'm going to write in the quadrant values here. These are the quadrant values. So if I were to say quadrant 1 and quadrant 3, that would be me talking about a positive value for inverse variation. The graph is in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. That's important. Write that down. All of this, write that down. If it's a negative k value, then it is in quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. That's going to help immensely because you will already have the graph in the proper location. It's just going to be a small fact of making sure how wide is it or how thin is it. And at this point in the game, to be honest with you guys, I just need to make sure it's in the right quadrant. That is very important to me. How wide it goes isn't as important yet. That's going to be a lot more important come Algebra 2. Okay, so positive k value, quadrants 1 and 3. Negative k value, quadrants 2 and 4. All right, well, let's jump into our example problems here for section 1. The first part is determining whether the equation represents direct, inverse, or neither. All right, so let's take a look. This equation is already set up as y equals, so that's great. Y equals 2 over x. This is in the format of inverse variation. So I'm going to put an IV, inverse variation, right there. Y equals, it's already set up. The equation for inverse variation is y equals k over x. That's the format that we're in. Remember, k will be a number. X and y aren't given as numbers yet. Okay. Now, number 2, though, does not say y equals. So we need to change that. That means we will have to solve for y by dividing both sides by 4 to cross out the 4's. So y equals 3/4, and then I'm going to put x right there, so it becomes a little bit more obvious to you that the 3/4 is then going to be multiplied by x. Therefore, it actually is in the format of direct variation. Okay, so direct variation is y equals kx. Inverse variation is y equals k over x. And if that's the case, we're looking at a number times x. That is what direct variation is, a number times x. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3, let's rearrange it because we are not in a y equals format. So we're going to have to move these 2 guys right here. So then it's going to be 5x, move the 3 over, so it becomes a -3 equals. When we move the y over, we're moving it so that that negative sign disappears. So when you move that y over, negative y move over becomes a positive y. Positive 3 move over becomes a -3. So now we're looking at y equals 5x minus 3. Again, this should be a red flag, something going off in your head, because notice the format. That -3 stands out like a sore thumb. There's no plus or minus something over here. Same thing. There's no plus, there's no minus, nothing. So that -3 messes it all up, meaning that this one right here is none. All right, neither format works when you tag on that -3. Okay, let's do the last one here. This one is still not set up as y equals. So how do we get rid of that x? We have to divide both sides by x. So those x's would cross out, leaving y equals 1/2 divided by x. Well, take a look at this. We have a number divided by x. There it is, a number divided by x. So number 4 here, this is an inverse variation. All right, so there's the first 4 worked out right there for you, trying to determine what does the equation represent, direct, inverse, or none, neither. All right, graphing. We're going to make this one real easy here. We're going to do 2 different colors. All right, so the y equals 3 over x, that's going to be in red, you'll see right there. And then the y equals -3 over x, that one is going to be in blue. And remember what I said, I care the most that you have your graph in the right quadrant. Okay, because if you look at our formats, both of these are inverse variation formats. Inverse variation formats. Let's do that quick refresher. That's these guys right here. Okay, so a positive value goes in quadrant 1 and 3. A negative value goes in quadrant 2 and 4. So here's what I mean by let's keep it simple. Red is a positive. I see a y equals 3 over x, 3 being a positive. That's in quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Right there. All right, so yes, could I be more precise? Yes, of course, but I care that you guys remember the quadrants first. All right, and then let's go to the blue. A -3 value, y equals -3 over x. This goes into quadrant 2 and quadrant 4. All right, so that is our big difference there for both parts, graphing number 5 here. So we graphed it, positive 3, quadrant 1, quadrant 3. Negative 3, quadrant 2, quadrant 4. Okay, so focus up on that. Let's finish out 2 more problems to go. These ones have some calculations. All right, here's what we're given. Y varies inversely with x. So they're telling us right off the bat that we are using inverse variation. Varies inversely. So that equation is y equals, I'm going to give myself a little more space here, y equals k over x. All right, so there's our inverse variation. Don't forget that equation. Now it says use the specified values. These are the specified values to write an inverse variation equation that relates x and y. So that's step 1. Then find the value of y when x is negative 3. Here are your steps. I wrote those over here. First thing you need to do is solve for k, because they're giving you x and y, but they're not giving you k. So the format normally, y equals k over x. If we switch it around and we make it say k equals, then it becomes k equals y times x. K equals y times x, because the first thing we have to do is solve for k. So let's do that first. All right, so we are going to now write k equals, and for number 6, 12 times negative 2. So k equals negative 24. All right, we'll do number 7 in blue here, kind of doing 2 problems at once. So we're going to say k equals 8 times 20. Therefore, k equals 160. Okay, so that's step 1 for both. Solve for k. Yes, we're using inverse variation. We'll zoom back in over here. Y equals k over x. But I've already now switched it around for you. So if I ever say, hey, solve for k, when you're using inverse variation, this is what you're doing. K equals y times x. Step 1. Now, step 2, after you have k, solve for y with the given x equals negative 3. Now we know what k is for both problems, and they gave us the x value. That x value is this one right here. This is part 2 to the problem. X equals negative 3. This k value is negative 24. This k value is 160. But I'm going to use the same x value for both problems. And then I'm going to find the value of y. All right, so now we go back into the format of, we'll go back to red here, y equals k over x. All right, we're using that same inverse variation format for both of these. So let's write this out. Y equals negative 24 over negative 3. Y equals 8. So we have our k value. We have our y equals 8 value. Let's do the exact same thing over here. All right, go to blue. So now y equals 160 divided by, let's see, our value is negative 3. Negative 3. All right. And let's see, this is actually going to work out to be a fraction. And reduce this down. Let's see, negative 53 and a third. All right, that's our y equals value here. And don't forget, there's our k value right there. Okay. Well, that covers us. That's section 1. All right, guys. And as I've always said in these videos, go back, rewind, pause, rewatch, do what you got to do. Copy all the notes down. Let's see. Here's our examples 6 and 7. And here's our examples 1 through 5. Ask questions in class. Stay focused. Stay driven. And you guys can do this. All right. I'll see you guys in the next video.